To quote Billy Joel, I'd rather laugh with the Syndras than cry with the Fangs. The Syndras are much more fun. Only the marked die young. Fresh and Buds now.
Fresh and
All right, folks, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all of my buds. And today, I'm very happy to welcome Pankaj Bhojwani here, aka Ethnic Smoke. How you doing, my friend? What's going on?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on. And it's been a chill weekend so far. Today, it's a Sunday as we're recording this, and Sundays for me, I was telling you before we got on the show, I like to do a lazy Sundays. It's just a day to myself. I get chores done, go run some errands and stuff. That's how it's been for me. How have you been?
I'm good. You know, I hate to break it to you, but and the listeners know this is a hard hitting podcast. I'm gonna throw some real fastballs at you. The relaxing Sunday ends now, Pankaj.
Oh God, I was not mentally prepared for this one. Okay, cool. Let me set up a bit straighter.
But no, I'm doing well. We got a great episode for everybody. We're gonna get to know Pankaj and talk a little bit about. We're at the end of the Rosetta season, and it's been an interesting one, and a lot stands to change with the release of The Hunted, whether that is from The Hunted itself or by some other factors like Living Legend. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll have a good time. But first, I gotta say, Pankaj, you wear a lot of hats in this game, or you have worn a lot of hats. I know you've stepped back from some of them, but you've worn them all very, very well. And I just want to know, well, when did Flesh and Blood and trading card games come into your life? And when did YouTube really start for you?
Oh, thanks for that glowing praise at the beginning first. When did trading card games start for me? If I want to really start at the way beginning, it was that I really liked Pokemon as a franchise. I just loved the IP, and so I just want to consume as much of it as possible. So super early on, I don't even remember how old I was. It was single digit age range. I liked the Pokemon cards, so I just buy them and then just try and play them. It was always over a kitchen table. In terms of competitive card games, though, that happened many, many, many years later, in my 20s. I got into Artifact. It's the Dota card game that not many people have heard about. And even fewer people have heard about the revival of Artifact called Artifact 2.0. That's the one which I got really into and I got competitive for. And it was that also led me to starting to make content. This was the first time I made content because I used to hunt for content creators in that game, but it was such a small game that it was basically just one streamer who would stream that game. And so I'm like, okay, there's no other streamers. I guess I'll do the streaming then. So I just started streaming that game. And it was my first time ever creating content, and I really enjoyed it. That game died, and I found Flesh and Blood shortly after. And by this point, I had the bug for both being competitive and also creating content. So yeah, that's how I got into Flesh and Blood and YouTube content.
Yeah, and when you hopped into YouTube content, what point in the game was that? Because like you said with the other game, that just wasn't a lot, and I remember when I started that there wasn't a lot of Flesh and Blood. There was some, but like it's been said on the show before, it's never enough. It feels like even when there is plenty of it, you're just like, well, I want to consume. Because we all like to, just watch content. At what point in Flesh and Blood's life cycle did you start creating content for Flesh and Blood specifically?
It was just a few months after I started playing the game, and I started the Tales of Aria pre-release. That was my first ever event. And a few months later, that's when I realized, okay, this is a game I do want to sink my teeth into. I do want to get competitive in it and really just be invested in it. And around then was when I started creating content. So in between Tales of Aria and Everfest. Yeah, and I think my reason for that, so there was a fair amount of content creators at that point. The game was still young, fewer content creators than we have now. So on one hand, I did feel like there was a space for more content creators. Mm. But the other thing, which was kind of relates back to why I started creating content for Artifact as well. I couldn't find the content that I wanted. So that's why I was making the content that I was doing. There were tons of gameplay videos. Like Fabrica was like a channel I used to watch a bunch because they have really, really good polished gameplay videos. At least they did like back at the time. But what I was really looking for was analysis. Like I really wanted to level up my game. And I was finding that for me personally, the best way to do that was to look back at my own replays. Like it's one thing to narrate your gameplay as you play it, like a live stream, but it's another to go back and reflect on your decisions. And I couldn't find that content, so I was like, I guess I'm going to make it then because no one else is doing this.
Well, yeah, that is like the toughest thing too when you're playing a game that doesn't have that. It's hard to level up, right? Just on your own. Sometimes you just need the resources. I think there are some players out there that will totally just level up on their own, and that's, I mean, more power to them. But I know myself and a lot of people, they need something to like really kind of grasp onto to like kind of get those ideas and the different like things you wouldn't even have thought of right initially. So that's really cool. Now you talked about talking through your games, but then also going back and then analyzing them. How has that transitioned you into the booth? Because I will say you've become such a prolific caster, and honestly, you really level up any stream that you're on, and it's just so impressive. Was that something you had always been keen to do? Because you mentioned that you kind of liked creating content, but that's a whole nother bag of hammers when you hop in the booth.
I can't say I always wanted to be on the coverage side of things. When I started the game, it was definitely from the perspective of being a player, like being a competitive player. My goal at the beginning was to be a competitive player, and I knew content creation was also something that I wanted to also be a part of. The casting thing was just kind of a one thing led to another sort of thing. I realized I was enjoying the content creation quite a bit, and I was tuning into coverage a lot, right? I think something that any competitive player knows, you're always tuned into coverage. Like that's a big way how you get better, how you have your finger on the pulse of the meta, if you will. And every time I tuned into tournaments, I listened to the casters, and part of me was like, this might be really fun to try out at some point. And then, the whole thing with Ethan happened where he asked me to come cast like Battlehard in New Jersey. That was back when he was doing backpack streamers, like he was doing his backpack stream. So we like both flew out there on our own expense and just like, we casted it together, and he was doing the production side of things. And I realized, this is actually really, really fun. I'd be down to do this. And yeah, it was just a one thing led to another. Suddenly, a few months later, got an email from LSS saying you want to come cast nationals. I was like, heck yeah, I guess this is what we're doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the game's better for it, and it's a lot of fun to see it happen. Now, the question is, because you mentioned that when you got into the game that you were player forward, right? You wanted to play it competitively. Now you're doing a lot of stuff in the booth, but you do have quite a bit of prowess in the game as a player. I think, golly, I got my timelines mixed up, but I'm pretty sure you just like randomly just like, I was in the booth one weekend. Now I'm going to just win a PTI on Icelander, or something like that. And you're just like, listen, putting the money where the mouth is, or the mouth where the money is in this case, I don't know, but it's pretty incredible. Now, do you think that your playing prowess lends itself to your skills as a broadcaster? Because it's a very analytical job sometimes, and you got to have that kind of backup in terms of the skill.
For my role in the booth specifically, I'd say so. It's I'm the color caster, right? What they call it. Like usually my partner is the play-by-play. Like Sam O'Byrne is one I partner with a bunch. He does the play-by-play, and I do the color or the analysis or the expert stuff. Is like I guess the way we phrase it. And for that role, I'd say I think my understanding of the game does help a lot. It's something I've strived towards since I started getting these casting gigs. I was like, I don't want to lose my proficiency in the game, I guess, because I'm not playing, because that's like what I want to bring to the booth. And honestly, I would shift it away from like prowess of the game, to be honest. I don't know about how much of it is like, I'm like a pro at the game or whatever, but it's more of it's imperative for me to be very, very engaged in the testing season leading up to the event that I'm covering. So, and I guess that kind of manifests itself as a bit of prowess just in the process, but it's more about being engaged with my testing group on whichever testing room I'm part of, and iterating on decks with them and observing their games and playing games and testing things with them, because then I can also bring to the booth, aside from just what people landed on, but also like the evolution of it. Oh, at first people were trying this strategy and that didn't work, so then they pivoted to this strategy, and the other side has adapted to this, and just being able to walk through that for the viewers is something that I like to bring to the booth as well. And that's more on the just being engaged on the testing side of things.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't cut yourself short. You're a good player, Pankaj, but that is, I mean, very important. That you are involved, and it's actually really very nice to hear too, because I think a lot of like viewers, the chat is crazy, right? And we all know that chat is the worst thing. Love chat, but it's the worst, right? Because they think on a very surface level, but the reality is you guys are doing your homework, right? And you're really putting pen to paper when it comes to putting on these awesome broadcasts of the game, which is pretty neat. Now, leading into what I would say is more my familiar territory, you are now not only broadcasting, but you are podcasting. Not just right now, Pankaj. You have transitioned into a host of Arsenal Pass. Can you tell us about that journey and what took you there?
Yeah, I was looking at the show notes beforehand and I saw the question about the journey to me being a new host of Arsenal Pass, and it's so interesting because I'm not sure how much of that was my journey. It was just, I mean, obviously it starts with Brendan, sort of losing interest in the game, and also just being busy with other things. So he was leaving, so there was already like a hole, which I wasn't even aware of actually. Like I noticed I tuned into Arsenal Pass like weekly. I used to. And I noticed that Hayden was bringing on more and more guests, and Brendan was showing up less. So I kind of suspected, but I didn't know at all. And it was just randomly, it was very much on Hayden, really. Like, he reached out to me once and was like, hey, do you want to come be a guest? And I was like, oh, yeah, I know he's been doing guest episodes the past few times. I was like, cool, yeah, I'll come be a guest. And then a couple of weeks after that, again, it was just him messaging me being, hey, do you want to be the new host? Like, there wasn't so much of a journey on my side because I didn't even know that there was an opening or that spot was available. So I wish I could say I was like, oh yeah, I strive towards this, I work towards it, and then I got it. Nah, it was just Hayden throwing me a bone, to be honest. He was just like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, ooh, yeah, okay, sure.
Well, listen, we got to paint a picture here. It was a long, arduous journey to becoming the new host of Arsenal Pass. But, I understand that's how things go, right? It's just, hey, you want to hop on? And I think you're a great addition. How are you enjoying it so far?
A lot, actually. Honestly, for a while, I was itching to make other content. So the reason I stopped doing my YouTube channel stuff was once I started becoming more of an established caster, I just found it was difficult for me to put in the time to make the content that I want to make and the consistency that I want to make it. Right? Like, I want to do like my weekly gameplay analysis videos, like what I used to do, but that involves testing a bunch and also finding a good enough game to cover and like to look back on, and then looking at the game once so I know what I want to talk about, and then actually recording it and then editing the time and all kind of stuff. It just became a lot to do alongside casting, alongside my regular day job, that I had to let that go. But I did want to sort of make other content too, not just, get to express my views in the game or whatever just when I'm in the booth. So this was it's been really, really nice to be able to make content again, honestly, on a weekly basis in a way that's less time consuming than it used to be.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about podcasts is, I mean, it is tough sometimes. Like, you're like, you have like a real job, real life, and all this stuff, and you're an adult, but like, and you do have to get the episode out every week, which is something. But it's nice that you have both of you to kind of keep each other on track and stuff like that. So, how are you finding the kind of podcast, like, in comparison to what you used to do, right? A lot of the analysis, is this a content form, or I don't. I mean, sounds pretentious. Is this an art form that that you? But is this something that you think is important for not just this game, but any game to have that kind of conversational content rather than like, here's what you need to know. Boom, 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 boom.
Oh, I have so many thoughts on that. But actually, first thing, real quick, you brought up art form. And I thought that was just something that people may not know. I actually used to be a theater kid. Like in high school, I was like in an art school, like doing theater. And then in college, like I was in the, my degree was physics and computer science, but like I was part of the theater group and like doing theater things. Just theater has been a bit of a passion or something, has always been a bit of a hobby for me, like since a long time. And I think like you talk about the art form, because I was speaking to someone recently about it, where it's like, I don't think I've lost my desire or passion for theater. I think it's just coming out in this form now, because making content and being a caster and all this, it is performative to some extent as well. Except I also get to geek the heck out on everyone as I do it, which is just the best balance. Perfect. It's just the perfect balance I could have found. So when you mentioned art form, I was like, that's kind of what I was thinking about. I was like, I think that to some extent, to some extent, I'd say it is. I mean, there is a lot to learn, and there's a lot of, it does feel like an art sometimes. Yeah.
I guess it does. I mean, like, listen, that probably explains why, especially you and Sam together, it's just like, whoa, look at this chemistry. But no, it's awesome, and I'm glad to. I'm always happy when more people are podcasting. I think it's just such a cool. Like I don't know. I loved talk radio growing up and stuff like that. It's just it's fun, and I think it fills a lot of people's days and kind of is a part of their kind of routine, which is nice. Now, we do got to get back on track with Flesh and Blood Package. I got to know your fresh faves, and your fresh faves are going to be the favorite of each of these categories. Starting with, who's your favorite hero?
Icelander, straight up. Just not even a question. Like, it's just the moment I saw the question on the notes, I was like, "Yep, it's Iceland. I'm going to move on to the next one."
All right. Well, now, what about your favorite weapon? Is it going to fall in line with Icelander? I wonder.
This one was tougher. So I didn't want to just put down Waning Moon, just because I was like, let's mix things up a little bit. I mean, Waning Moon is pretty sick, but I think in terms of weapons, where like when I swing it, I just like you get the dopamine, like you get the neurons activate. This might be really strange. It actually might just be Searing Emberblade.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
That was one of those weapons where I remember it being spoiled, and I remember thinking, wow, that's a garbage weapon. And then you play fire a few times, and you swing it, you do a Draconic Channeling, and you swing the Emberblade, and I was like, oh my god, that's exactly what I need. I just needed the extra Draconic Chainlink that had go again. And then I have a resource floating to either buy back the Phoenix Flame, because it costs 1 now, or to play my other 0 cost, and I get to do a Phoenix Flame for free and a 1 cost. And the Emberblade is just like kind of the glue that like put that deck together, and it was always so fun to swing. For a while, I know people were messing around with Kodachi Fi. They're like, oh, Kodachi, Mask Momentum Fi, and Searing Emberblade Fi. And I saw the merits of the Kodachi Fi list, but I just never could get into it, because I was like, I just want to swing Searing Emberblade. Don't show me this Kodachi nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the cooler things. I remember kind of feeling the same, like, oh, this doesn't seem that good. And then you're like, oh no, this is actually kind of brilliant, because, well, you don't want to fall into the trap where every ninja wants to play Kodachis. You want them to play their weapon, and then Fi wanted to play Fi's weapon, which was pretty neat. So, great answer. I don't know if we've ever gotten Searing Emberblade as an answer. I'll have to look back. What's your favorite equipment?
This, I think, has to be Grains of Blood Spell. So another thing, I think some people might have caught on by this point. I also enjoy Warrior quite a bit. Wizard is definitely like my main. Like, if there's a playable Wizard, I'm just always gonna play Wizard. But my next in line would probably be Warrior, actually. And Grains of Blood Spell, again, just one of those cards that seems very unassuming at the beginning. And then once you start playing with it, you just realize the number of things it solves for you in the Warrior game plan. Warrior is all about snowballing from turn to turn, right? And something that I'm sure every Warrior player knows is you're on the front foot, you've got the tempo, and then you draw all reds. and you're like, and you're like literally like 1 or 2 turns ago, I was resource rich. I drew my too many blues like 1 or 2 turns ago, but then now I drew the all reds, and I just lost this entire snowball that I've been working so hard to get. And Grains of Bloodspill helps you just bring that on from turn after turn. Like when you have your resource rich hand, you can convert it into resources for the following turn. And the super nifty thing about it is that on the following turn, if say you have a normal resource, but you have your 1 blue for the turn, but you have these extra vigor tokens you don't know what to do with, you just put those right back into Grains of Bloodspill, and you're just rolling those vigor tokens again and again. And then when you draw that resource light hand, you're like, okay, these vigor tokens are right there to help you do your thing. Or certain times you have these 1-cost reactions and 0-cost reactions, right? And then I have this 1 vigor token left over from the previous turn, and that helps me fund this turn because I drew 2 of my 1-cost reactions instead of 2 of my 0-cost reactions, for example. And then on top of that, there's the whole thing with the reprise. Again, every warrior player knows you plan your turn out, and you will be caught in the spots where you will hold up an extra card because you really need the on-hit to go through. So you'll hold up this reprise card, like Iron Song Response, probably the most classic one. So you hold that and be like, I need this on-hit throw, I need to keep my Dawnblade counter or whatever, I will need the gold from my Kasai. But then your opponent sees you holding an extra card and says, oh, I'm not going to play around the Iron Song Response, so I'm not going to give you the reprise. And then you're stuck just IPing one because it's holding back this reprise card that you can't do anything with. But Grains of Bloodspell helps you with that too.
Yeah.
Like, it's obviously not the exact rate that you want. You're just converting 1 card for 1 resource, but it's still better than what it used to be, where you just IP. The number of times, like before Grains of Bloodspell, you'd see warriors just only draw 3 cards at the end of the turn because they're holding back a reprise card that they had to do for their playline to make sense. It's like, just so many things about this card. It's very, very elegant, very, very simple on the surface, but extremely deep.
Oh yeah, and it blocks too, which is not for nothing as well. No, I think even
Sometimes I forget that.
Yeah, right.
Everything else about the card, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's also templated too.
I think there was a Dory game at Toronto this past weekend where you got to really see the power of Grains. I almost said spill blood. No, Grains in the Flesh and Blood there, which was really cool. Now, what's your favorite card to throw in your deck? Like actions, non-attack actions.
So this isn't a card that I've thrown in my deck in a very long time, but I wish I could. It's similar to the Emberblade thing I was talking about, where when I resolve this with its effect, it just activates all sorts of neurons in my brain. It's Gaze the Ages, which I've only ever played in Kano, obviously, because it only ever made sense in Kano. But believe me, when Icelander came out, I did try to make this card work in Icelander too, and it just doesn't make sense. But yeah, it's kind of everything I want from a wizard. There's a setup nature of it, right? Because Opt is, you're not getting value this turn, but you're getting value in the future. Or in Kano's sense, you're sort of getting it right now too, but there is still more of a you're setting something up, which I really like as a wizard sort of identity to some extent. And then blue, block 3, cost 0, non-attack action. Everything wizard. Pay off for playing things at instant speed, which is what I want to do as a wizard. And goes back to, it's just a free opt to, where you do your quest, and you just get just a free opt to, and it just comes back to your hand. And it's like this, it's so, it seems like a very, very minor benefit, which to some extent it is, but it is so fun to play with, and the floor is exactly where you want it to be. Blue non-attack block 3. I'm just like, oh, I love this card, but haven't been able to play it.
That's great. That's a great answer. Now, this is not a newer question. At this point, we've been asking it a while, but in the world of Wraith, what class and talent would you be?
Questions like this always make me a little bit philosophical. So I do want to address a bit of a... So it's just going to point out how this question can sometimes be interpreted. It is, what would you be versus what would you want to be, right? So actually, last time in this conversation, someone was asking me, have you watched Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah, so, like a classic, like, I don't know, bit of an icebreaker question is, which element would you be? Which bender would you be, right? And I feel like hearing this question now, class and talent and Flesh and Blood, reminds me of like my reaction back then too. Like, at least for Avatar, I was like, I feel like who I would want to be would be an airbender. But I think I have to be honest with myself where it's like who I would be an earthbender.
Hmm.
So yeah. So if you ask me class and talent, like who I would want to be, well, definitely wizard. And talent, probably a mystic wizard
Ooh.
would probably be like what I'd want to be. But like who again, like who I like would be, I feel like I think Earth is like a talent slash the idea of Earth does make sense, like for like just like my personality and stuff. So Earth and then probably still wizard to be honest. So like Earth wizard would
Earth
be like
Wizard
who I
would be.
would.
I mean, both sound cool. Yeah, I mean, it's however you want to interpret the question, but some people really, really like take it very literal, which is totally fine. They're like, well, I work in sales, so I'd be a merchant, something like that. But no, great answer. And this is a new.
Yours.
What was that?
What's yours, by the way?
Oh,
Which class
jeez.
would you be?
It's brute for sure, and likely earth brute.
Earth Brute?
Although
Ooh,
I
okay.
mean, I love the cold weather, so maybe ice brute, which would be pretty neat.
Oh, like a Yeti?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be cool.
oh
Yeah.
yeah. That's exactly. Oh, that'd be so sick. LSS, if you're listening. This is a newer question that I always like to ask, especially as the game has gotten a little bit older. We're 5 years, a lot of sets. What is your greatest set of all time currently?
This is a tough one.
Yeah.
So obviously Tales of Aria has a bunch of nostalgia in it,
Mhm.
just because that was the set I started with. Uprising had my favorite hero in it. Um, oh, okay, this might sound really rude. It might be Heavy Hitters, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because well, I think okay, it's a little difficult. I might be conflating the set versus the meta that was present where right after that set came out. I really love the post Heavy Hitters meta.
Oh yeah.
The one where it was KO, Dorinthia, Victors with a Kasai. I could play Kasai. Kasai was there. And you still had, there was like Kano was there. You had to think about Kano, even like, so you had the degenerate stuff in the Kano and the Prisms. Dromai still existed, but then you also just had the fundamental flesh and blood stuff going on with the KOs and the Victors and the Kasais. That whole mix, it was such a wide meta. It felt like there was a playstyle for everyone, honestly,
Mhm.
and each different hero, each different playstyle had its own thing to contend with, its own problem to contend with. Like the Kanos had to contend with like the KOs that were a bit too quick and wolves attacking no fear or something. And then the Dromais had to contend like the Prisms that would just kept like looping them. The Kasais had to contend with the Dromais, and the Victors had to contend with the Kasais. It was just this massive like octagon graph of heroes and all these matchups. And I was very rooted in like fundamentals and stuff. So that meta I really, really like, and I attribute that quite a bit to Heavy Hitters. So maybe, yeah, maybe that's just my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with heavy hitters and what it brought to the table. So I love that answer. I'm always kind of on the teetering. I think heavy hitters. I mean, I'm also like a Welcome to Race stand, but like if I'm looking at the grand scheme of things, heavy hitters. And I loved Rosetta Limited, right? And I think Rosetta is still a lot of cool heroes, a lot more underpowered after Mysteria, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, great answer. Now we are on the cusp of a new set called The Hunted, the return to your favorite heroes set of Uprising. Although it looks like Icelander's not coming back this time.
Rip.
Yet we'll see. Maybe in the third part of the story, but it's going to be pretty interesting because we just had the last look at the Rosetta season this past weekend in Toronto. Really, I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything before the pre-release major wise, but it was
I believe it's in the world premiere next weekend, and then so
yeah.
it should just be the world premiere. Yeah.
And so now it's all The Hunted, and that's the big hype here. And Zen took down Toronto. Zen has been a force to be reckoned with, despite all of our best efforts. Zen has been a force to be reckoned with. I want to ask you. You just talked about how amazing you thought the heavy hitters meta was that season, and it was. How healthy do you think this past season was?
So this is sort of this is like the sort of post Worlds, like um after Processor got banned, after Worlds, and then up until now, right? That's the sort of pocket meta that we've been living in. It is different from the Worlds meta, despite that being the last Tier 4 event.
Yeah.
And a new set coming out before next Tier 4 event. I've been a little. It's hard for me to say it's been super compelling, to be honest, given the dominance of MST. I think quite a few of the Balhardens and I think Calling Portland as well, we saw like over half of the top 8s being MST heroes. Also, for me personally, I think it's dawned on me more and more that my favorite hero to have been playing ever since Icelander LL has been Nu. And it's dawned on me more and more with the release of Rosetta that CYB Nu seems to be the best way to play that deck. But I hate CYB. I just really don't like that card. So for me personally, I've been feeling a little bit like there isn't really a deck for me personally that I enjoy a lot. As well as kind of the meta just being like, oh, it's a lot of MST stuff. The only I think the non-MST heroes you can play are like Aurora and Viserai, which are like fine, but not. At least the Aurora, not so much in the current iteration of Viserai, isn't something that's super compelling to me. So on my side, I've been glad that I've been able to like take the break around this time. There hasn't been any massive Tier 4 event to prepare for. In terms of, I guess, coming back to your question of view on the meta, it's not unhealthy. I will put it that way. It's not Amsterdam level. Like that was unhealthy. I was just you're just playing Zen or you're playing Nu, and you shouldn't be playing anything else. It's definitely not that level. There's still variety. The top 8s still have not been looking like, oh, it's the like 3 of the same heroes. There's still diversity. It's just most of them came from the same set. For example, if you looked at the Toronto top 8, there was a nice mix of heroes. So I'd say it's fine. It's like an average level of health, I suppose.
Yeah, and it is weird because we are still seeing the MST dominance here, and like Zen is at this point, you're just like, well, it's Zen. It's we're just gonna see Zen be popular, but also Enigma has been one hell of a hero as well, and Nu being a hero that I think is the most fair of the 3, but still good, right? Certainly not a bad hero. And
careful with that one. You're gonna get a bunch of comments. Nu is fair. What?
Okay, well, I should say I'm a Riptide player, so I think Nu is the most fair. I'm like, yeah, this is keep on coming. I'll take 20. Yeah. She
is the most fair of the 3.
Of the 3, yeah. I'm not saying she's
3.
I'm not saying she's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it is kind of interesting, to see that because we have 3 new heroes coming out here in a couple weeks at this point. Another assassin, a warrior, and another ninja, right? So not a lot of different stuff being entered, although warrior being a draconic warrior at that kind of entering the meta is very interesting. Do you think that they will, on the surface, because we can't really tell without seeing the rest of the set, but from what you've seen, do you think these heroes are going to shake things up in a meaningful way?
I think they might, at least my current look at it, with the few spoilers that we have seen and the little information we have, my current working theory is that they might actually push Zen to be even higher than he is, and push Enigma down. Because my view is Syndra seems to be really, really good into Enigma, at least on the surface. All these little pings that you can't even block to just blow up a ward, like, she's just like plays Blood Runs Deep, and then now the daggers is sending 1 damage each, and you can't block that. It'll just blow up your ward without you being able to interact with it effectively. And it's all a little very, very difficult to block, right? Maybe Dense Blue Mist comes back and Enigma start taking Dense Blue Mist, and maybe it hurts Syndra a little bit. But in general, the overall theme that's going on with Syndra seems like it'll be a problem for Enigma. But that same theme is something Zen deals really, really well with, because he's saying, nice 1 damage pings, here's a Zen state idiot. Right? It's like, yeah, it's kind of like why he's so good into Viserai. who Viscerai also poses a lot of problems to Enigma for the same reason that I expect Syndra would, but gets hosed on by Zen because he's just like, yeah, 1 damage pings, I deal with that so easily. A block with hat, here you go, you're done. My turn now. Here's to chase the tail. So on that front, at least the Syndra side of it, I see it pushing Enigma down further, pushing Zen up a little more. Fang, I'm gonna be honest, I don't expect him to have too much of an impact. They just this might be me. This might be me just bracing myself, to be honest. It might be I've been hurt in the past, man. It's like they just don't give us good warriors. Like, like it's just like
Warriors do, man. Warriors so do.
like Kasai had like the one season when she came out when she could be played, and since then just like nothing. Olympia is just trash. They give Bolton stuff and he can never be played, and Dorinthia is just again that same season she could play Hatchets, was the most boring version of Dorinthia ever. And like aside from that, you can't really play Warriors. So I'm coping with Fang. I have a list that I'm like working on Fang. I would definitely will try him for the first week. But my mind right now is like, don't get your hopes up. You're just gonna be hurt in the end. So I'm gonna don't have too many high hopes for Zen. For Fang, and then Arachne is super interesting. That's the biggest mixed bag, right? Because we have no idea what chaos even means. Like, as in that we know the 6 agents of chaos now, but we don't really understand how the talent functions. Like if I tell you Mystic, you immediately know, okay, this is the kind of way, this is the theme of that talent. I tell you Draconic, we already have a baseline for what that means. Chaos, we just seen a couple of cards in the hero ability, and we don't really know how that functions in a game. So that's kind of the most mixed bag. If they're strong enough, I could see that sort of changing my current like working theory of like what I just told you, with Zen's rise and Enigma's going down a little bit. But I also, to some extent, find it hard to believe that they would release an assassin that's stronger than Nu.
Yeah.
And if Nu is having her current like sort of middling impact right now, I don't expect Neo Arachne to shake things up.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I look at the New Arachne and this looks fun, and it kind of stops there, right? Because based on the hero ability, right, it's hard to predict what you're gonna do, and I guess you can hedge your whole deck in some way that like no matter what version you turn into, that you're pretty happy with it, but still, it's like rolling scabskins every turn, which is like, I think that they want brutes to do that, so I don't know, but that's kind of interesting. I'm gonna say that I do have hope for Fang, and the only reason is I feel like currently what we've seen, I think Fang has the best way to utilize those fealty tokens in a really meaningful way for the gameplay. And now we do need to see more of what the commons are probably going to look like for Fang. So I'm just hoping, like, it's just like they got to give one really good warrior, right? But I don't know. It is tough with certain kinds of heroes that are already popular in this game. But
I'm with you, man. Yeah, I'm holding out hope too. But yeah, we'll see. I think the biggest question mark is that you brought up the commons, and I think in that the biggest question mark is how are these heroes marking their opponents? That's the piece we haven't seen. We've seen like 3 cards that mark. We've seen that Proclaim Vengeance, which I'm pretty sure is just going to be a limited card, that instant that marks you get resource of its Arachne. Fang has his Majestic Long Whisker Loyalty that can mark, but you need a bunch of Draconic Chainlinks to actually get all the modes on the card, all the modes that you'd want. So it feels like there needs to be other things aside from just that one. So that's the biggest question mark. And then because that directly relates to the fealty tokens, which directly relates to what you're talking about, that he needs to use them to give the daggers go again. At the same time, he needs 3 of them to make his daggers free. So
yeah.
I think in general, my thing with one sort of fundamental issue I see with Warriors and Riptide, actually, as well, you brought that up just now, is that they are defensively slanted heroes where the resource base and just the way the decks have to be built don't allow you to have too many blues, which in by itself is like could be okay until you realize there's a bunch of strong arcane damage in the meta, right? Until strong arcane damage comes in the meta, I'm this defensive hero like Kasai, but Viscerai is sending like 10 arcane at me and I can't block anymore. So So then I just lose. And Riptide and Warrior kind of just like non-blue warriors like Fang, I expect Fang to be in Kasai. They just kind of like have that problem, and that hasn't been solved.
Yeah, it is tough, and I guess like it's good that some heroes kind of fill that role of like, well, if the meta allows for it, you can slip in and like really take a tournament by storm. But then you run into OTK Viscerai or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I regret everything. Now, there are some other shakeups that can happen in this season, this upcoming season of the Hunted, and that is the living legending of certain heroes. Zen just won another tournament this past weekend. Zen is very close, I think about 100 points away from LL. Will likely hit it in the RTN season, which I believe starts about a month from now, February 8th. So soon after the release of the set, The Hunted. So that is pretty interesting. Some other notable ones here. Dash, not really a meta player, really. Like if Dash LLs, it's actually might be just worse for other other heroes because they don't have the pistol anymore. Azalea is relatively close. Viscerai is getting close, and Enigma, if at the same rate that she was getting points, continues to get them, will get there as well. Now, of those heroes, which do you think has the biggest effect on the meta and the most likely to actually LL in the RTN season mostly?
Well, Zen and Enigma, I would say they're both equally likely to LL, I think. And okay, I guess Zen is closer, so I guess Zen is maybe a little more likely. But both of them are so likely that I expect both of them to LL by the end of our RTN season, and I expect both of them leaving the format to shake up the meta a bunch. I mean, everything what I just said about like my impression of the way Syndra is gonna impact the meta, well, that just goes out the window, right? Once Zen and Enigma aren't there anymore. So I was like, she'll be strong into Enigma on the surface and bad into Zen, but that doesn't matter when both those heroes don't exist anymore. Also, I think something that could happen with Enigma, Enigma leaving specifically, kind of just means everyone needs to now start testing a whole bunch of decks that we just didn't bother testing at all because Enigma was there constricting the meta in the way that she does. One of them, Jarl, specifically, right, came out in this sort of this off-season, after Worlds, before now. I know people have been testing him. He has legs. He does some powerful things. Just isn't allowed to play the game while Enigma's still around. But once Enigma goes, I don't know, maybe Jarl comes in, and then that affects, probably likely going to affect Syndra, maybe even likely affect Zen. I think that might be a bit more of an even matchup, like the Zen Jarl, but like Jarl Syndra seems on the surface pretty uncomfortable for Syndra, uncomfortable for Aurora as well. So maybe Jarl becomes the guardian in the format that we haven't had for a while. Does that mean new increases? Or if our Jarl's building in a way that don't allow new to have a whole bunch of like powerful Guardian Blues, but if they do it that way, like I don't know, does Jarl then maybe Jarl doesn't have a good matchup into Victor anymore because Victor is like winning every clash because he'll have all these like inky blue ice cards. I don't know. It's just I think Enigma and Zen leaving, especially Enigma leaving, gives us we just need to test a whole bunch of stuff like once that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to imagine Zen does it first, right? It could even happen in that first week of RTN season based on how it goes. Enigma probably by the end of RTN season because it is still a lot. And like if Syndra is popular, maybe kind of gatekeeps those points that Enigma needs, which I do think it would be, I don't want to poo-poo on anybody's favorite hero. Enigma is very cool, especially in Limited, was so cool. I don't want to play against any more of them personally. And, give the Guardians a chance, guys. Come on. So I'm pretty interested. Now, once they leave, you talk about the Guardians kind of coming back. Hopefully Jarl gets his time in the sun to play. How do you think that the Hunted heroes fare once that happens? Because now, like you said, Syndra doesn't have that great deck that she can target. Arachne still, we don't know what's going on, but could still be a force to be reckoned with, or assassin in general. And then our boy Fang, which we know is going to be the best hero in the format anyway, right? So, what do you think there?
I think where Syndra lands, So to me, Syndra seems very, very similar to Aurora in that it's this sort of low to the ground aggro deck with a bit of evasion built in. Aurora in the form of arcane damage, and Syndra in the form of straight up. And we actually don't even have a name for this damage type. I don't know, direct damage, just flick knives type stuff. Yeah. So both of them are this sort of low to the ground, want to go wide and have some evasion built in to their kit. So because they're so similar, which honestly hasn't happened in a while. If you think about the aggro decks this parse format, we had Viscerai, Zen, Aurora, who all have different damage profiles in a sense. Damage profiles and the way they play the game and the sort of end games that they have and how defensive they are, etc. Like Viscerai is way more on the arcane side, can set up here and there. Aurora can't really set up, but kind of has like a very, very good like turn-to-turn thing. So Syndra seems very much similar to Aurora. So where she lands is just going to be, like to me, dependent on whether she outpaces Aurora. It would be akin to back in the day. Like back in the day, aggro decks were just, oh, you're just supposed to play Stubby's Fire and you're not supposed to play your Briar or whatever. Because Stubby's Fire is just a faster aggro deck, so you just always default to the best aggro deck. Now, we're in a very different time where actually the different damage profiles afford them different advantages in different matchups. Like Zen with the Zen state is very different. Viscerai with his like arcane damage, like massive amounts of arcane damage, and being allowed to set up makes him a very different feel, even though he's still in the aggro category. Whereas Syndra and Aurora are so similar that I feel like this would be similar to like the previous aggro decks, where one of them is going to be faster than the other, and so you should just play that one. Now, whether that's Syndra or Aurora, I don't know. We'll obviously have to see. So that's my take on where Syndra is going to land. Fang. Oh man,
I mean, let's be real. Long Whisker Loyalty is a really awesome card. Like, I think it's very powerful.
I think so, but it's if you can get to 3 Draconic Chain Links, and I don't know how you're getting there. It seems like that's my thing, right? Your Obsidian Fire Vein, you need to play a react on that, to a Draconic react on that to give it a go again. And if you want to use a Long Whisker Loyalty later down the line, like not on your first Obsidian Fire Vein, so where are you getting your first few Draconic Chain Links from? Are you using all your fealties on that? Then how are you making your daggers free? There's lots of questions. Like, I was looking at Long Whisker Loyalty versus Syndra's Majestic that we know, like Blood Runs Deep. You read Blood Runs Deep and you know instantly how it works. Like, okay, dagger, Blood Runs Deep. It's free now, and now it's a 0 for 4 go again. Everything just works. And I'm looking at Fangs, and I was like, I'm still playing this on the first Obsidian Fire Vein, but I only get to pick one mode, and it's a +2. I'm like, okay. No, I'm still playing later on, but then how am I getting later on? Like, how am I getting the chain links? So yeah, so Fang, we'll see. I think Fang's also, it kind of depends where the arcane damage stuff lands, right? If Viscerai LLs, which he should, I think.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I could see Fang having a tough time into Viscerai. Like, Draconic, defensive slanted hero. I don't know. I don't really want to play into arcane damage if I'm playing Fang. So, but the Assassins. I think he probably is going to be pretty fine into new, right? Just, yeah. Like, new hates dual wielding. Like, a dual wielding warrior is just such a bad matchup for new, at least the way they're currently built. I could see him being really good into new, and I don't think new is going to LL next season. Is that, and then Arachne is the mixed bag, as we already brought up. It's very hard to predict where Arachne is going to land.
I don't even think Arachne knows, to be honest. But yeah, no, it should be really interesting. I like, to be honest with you, Pankaj, I'm just really excited to see how it all shakes out, because I do think this set looks really cool, and I'm excited to like draft it. Mostly, this seems like it's going to be a really sweet limited set. But once MST starts the mist kind of settles a little bit, as it were, and we get to see like some other heroes have their time in the sun, it's going to be very exciting. Now, we do have some listener questions. These are submitted on the Buds Discord, which is free for anybody to join. It's in the show notes below. First one comes from Pat Shaw, who asks, Pankaj's rise to prominence in this game skyrocketed in 2024. How much of what has come to pass was a goal that you set versus things that you never even thought of before they happened? For example, casting for the Mothership and Arsenal Pass, etc.
Most of them were things I never thought would happen. Casting, like I said, when I started the game, I thought of myself as just someone who's going to go play and be one of those tournament grinders. And hopefully get results. That was my goal. And then, yeah, ended up being a co-host for Arsenal Pass. Neither of those were in the predictions. I was yeah, it was I'll go be a player, and then I would also make YouTube content and hopefully have a successful YouTube channel for the original goals. And then now it's completely shifted. I guess winning a Battle Hardened in 2024 was one of the goals. I was like, that is, I guess, something I set, like just winning tournaments like when I can't play them. So that would be the closest thing. But yeah, most of it has just been, life just happens. Like just I don't know, like things like it just opportunities come, and I was like, oh, okay, sweet. I guess we're doing this now, and I love it.
Well, it's all amazing. Great question, Pat Shaw. You should create some content, friend, if you're still listening. Sigma asks, given how CYB has steered so many emotions, ours included, Pankaj, how would you see the cleric class come to life?
Oh, so wow, cleric is honestly not one of the potential new classes I've given much thought of. I've thought of like how maybe necromancer could happen. Haven't really given thought to cleric, and it's a little hard to imagine how they make it distinct from Verdant, right? I was almost gonna say Icelander, rip, but like from Verdant, right? Who definitely has a life gain theme and also arcane damage stuff. Like I would expect cleric to also be an arcane damagey sort of class, right? Doesn't physical damage on a cleric doesn't quite make sense with the life gain element. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how mechanically they would do it, but of course, I mean, I think they do class design so incredibly well in this game. Like when you play the class and the talent, and you feel that way for most cases. But the first part of this question, talking about CYB steering emotions, I think part of why CYB steers as much emotions as it does, or like stirs as much anger as it does, is because it's generic, right? I don't think it's a fundamental, oh, this person's gaining life and fatiguing, and that is like such a big problem, it's pissing me off. Sure, some people, yes. But I think what has caused it to be a little more widespread than just a few people who hate against fatigue is that it's generic. And I don't expect the cleric class, even if it is more on the life gain fatigue style, to produce that level of dislike for it, because it'll be like, that's what this class does, rather than, oh, here's like 30, 40, 50 points of life gain you can put in any deck.
Yeah. And it'd be kind of interesting with the existence of CYB when they would ever put a cleric class from, onto a card. So it'd be interesting. William, well, I guess kind of states rather than asks, but I've got to ask Pankaj before if he plans on making any more parody music videos, and he said unlikely, so now I'm begging, please quit your job to make more.
I wish I could. That was really, really fun. It was, oh my god, it was so time intensive though. It was a few years ago. It was one of the few times I like didn't go back home to Singapore over Christmas. So I kind of spent my Christmas break doing that. It took me like 6 full days. I'm talking like I wake up at 10 a.m. and I'm like shooting and editing, and I'm ending at like 7 p.m. And that happened like 5 or 6 days straight for me to make that video. It was super fun, but yeah, aside from just needing that level of time commitment, it's hard. I have a bunch of ideas. I have like a document full of like a whole bunch of other like parody music video ideas. So maybe one day I have them. Every now and then I think about it. I think one of the recent ones, especially with Amsterdam and Zen, I was like, have you heard I'm Just Ken from the Barbie?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like, yeah, just I'm Just Zen, and then you just change all the other lyrics to it. I was like, I have a bunch of these ideas just like floating around in a document. So we'll see. But yeah, for now, it's a bit of a tough ask.
They stay behind lock and key for now. Junior asks, well, I guess states first. A phrase commonly said is, well, if this hero is good, then the game is in a bad spot. Do you think this is healthy for the game? Do you think it will always be a thing? And then also, how long until Teklo gets his time in the sun?
So Teklo is one of those where, yeah, if Teklo is good, then the game's probably not in the healthiest spot. This wouldn't be super fun. Like Reinar is in a similar position too. Just Intimidate is just such a toxic mechanic that if everyone's getting intimidated everywhere, it would be really, really bad. Honestly, I'd put I put Enigma in that spot too. Like I think when she was like the best deck, the game just isn't in a good spot. Honestly, Dromai as well, Illusionist as well. For similar reasons why Intimidate is toxic in a sense, is that it turns off your opponent's blocking ability, right?
Yeah.
It asks your opponent, hey, can you always convert 4 to 5 card hands? And Illusionist just does that. So when Illusionist is the best deck, that's I think for me personally like the least favorite times to like play the game. That's when the game's in the worst spot it's been in, when Illusionist is like at the top. So Teklo, Reinar, yeah, I'd put all these heroes in that same thing, in that same category. So I think do I think this will always be a thing? I don't. I think especially recent design, I think they are shifting towards giving more heroes tools for the bad matchups that so far have just been a given. Like Guardian's bad into Illusionist, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
But now I think they're shifting towards giving more tools, like Jagged Edge, for example, for warriors, like into like Enigma, which I don't think solves a matchup, but it is indicative of the design that they're going towards, where they're like, okay, we're gonna start giving people tools instead of just saying, this is your bad matchup, deal with it.
Yeah. I hope Tekla doesn't get good, Junior. I'm sorry. No, no, it is. I mean, yeah. Actually, I do want to have a follow-up question on that. So you talk about intimidate, and I agree, it is a kind of a toxic mechanic, right? And do you think that we don't get the same brute support because of how toxic intimidate is, that they're almost scared to get to that point? We've seen like the illusionist get to that point and we've had to deal with it, but we never really got the Reinar being the like end all be all in the meta because maybe they're a little bit too scared or too intimidated by the prospect of it being good.
I think so. I mean, Flesh and Blood sort of, I think a draw for this game for many, many people, myself included, was the level of interaction, right? Mm-hmm. It feels like there's so many points of interaction over the course of the game. And Intimidate's one of those mechanics that takes away the interaction, just straight up takes away the agency from the opponent. That I could see them being nervous about that for sure. I obviously don't know whether that's where it is. Another thing to bring up, though, also Levia is in the conversation too. Levia is very, very strong. And if you just give Brute an extra blue 6 and you raise her floor, like that's a problem, right? She has a very high ceiling, but a very, very low floor. Mm-hmm. And if you raise the floor too high, then now she just has this incredible high ceiling without a low floor to like compensate for it. So that is the other thing. These two heroes, alongside Scabskin Leathers, also being a card that can just be very frustrating and quite unfun to play against and watch as well on the covered side of things. Right, if someone's just rolling scabs every now and then, and the games are decided by a die roll, this is not very compelling. So I think all those factors come together to perhaps be like, okay, maybe hold back on giving Brute too many very powerful cards.
Yeah. Next question comes from Nathaniel from Bulbrew Games. With your experience with Clash, and now that it's had a huge surge in countries where cards are harder to get, should Clash be an official format, especially now there is a Clash committee actively making bans and erratas to the format, which I believe Nathaniel's involved with?
When you say official format, I'm not entirely sure if this is talking about like whether it should be like a calling with a Clash or whether maybe this format gets a bit more recognition from LSS. I would love to see Clash perhaps come to armories. Mm-hmm. I think I would love that because exactly what Nathaniel's saying here. It's really, really good for newer players or for areas where cards are harder to get. I think I love the flavor of Clash where it's effectively commoner, which means it's cheap to get access to cards. I'm sure a bunch of people probably just like give you even like just their Clash decks, but you still get quite a bit of flavor of your heroes because you're allowed specializations. So to me, it's so compelling. You get to capture why a lot of us love this game, that you get to feel like your class and talent, and often that is tied to the specializations, right? Like, I don't know, like singing Steelblade in Dorinthia, for example, it's a fun card to resolve. It's like, this is what my hero does. It's like unique to my hero, and you're still playing this like lower powered format. You don't need all these expensive cards. So to me, that makes it perfect for like an armory level. Like to be like, oh, some armories are Clash. In terms of official like pro play, like whether it should make the circuit, I don't have enough experience playing the format to I think give an opinion on that one. I could see it. I mean, they did have Blitz, right, for Worlds a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, and I know they're like actively working towards like having like other formats. So I'd be down for this. Yeah, but until I have an idea of what the balance is like, I don't think I can provide an opinion on that part of it, on the pro play side of it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The commoner, right? Like we did see, it was a Battle Harden, Commander Battle Harden.
Yeah.
So like it's not out of the realm of possibility, I don't think. But like, I think LSS has enough on their plate probably too, where they just don't like. It's cool. It's community formats are amazing. So, you know, I don't think they're looking for extra work. I would imagine, because I'm not looking for extra work either. So, but Capolo does ask though, what would be your entrance song as a caster, and what about as a player?
I think I might just have the same song for both of these. Although, actually, don't know about the caster one. But it's just this is one song where if I ever want to like get real hype, like this is what I play. Like it was like towards the end of like my gym session or something. I just need a bit of like a boost. There's this remix of two songs I really really like. It's not on Spotify because just something this guy made on YouTube like 13 years ago or something. It's called "Sweet Dreams Are Made of Seven Nation Army." And it's a remix of Sweet Dreams and Seven Nation Army. And that song is it's so incredibly hype. It just always like gives me a bunch of energy. And yeah, I'm just gonna put this down as my entrance song for both.
That's good. That's a good answer. And then finally, Darth Prentice, aka Greg, comes in and asks, considering the age of Flesh and Blood as a game, are people complaining too much about the variability of power between heroes and sets?
Too much. I'm not sure what is too much. I'm gonna say, you know what? Actually, I'm just gonna say no. I think people are complaining, obviously, but that's just gonna happen. It's hard to distinguish between people complaining too much versus we are just living in an age where we get to see complaints more, and also complaints typically just get pushed up on our feed a lot more, right? Yeah. You look at like Twitter, like the stuff that gets more engagement is typically just the negative stuff. So it can be hard. It may seem like people are complaining more, but it could just be that people are complaining the same amount. We're just seeing more of it because of the way we consume content these days and what gets recommended to us more. But on the whole, as someone who's like played a whole bunch of other games in the past, and you go on like the subreddit for those games, for example, and it's always just it's way more negative and way more toxic than what I've seen for Flesh and Blood. I think part of that is just because it's a smaller game and there's less like anonymity. I think currently in Flesh and Blood, you say something, people know who you are, and in that sort of space, people just tend to not be as negative. Maybe that's why, or maybe there's just a crowd that we attract. But in any case, I do feel like if I'm comparing to other games, I think our level of complaints and discourse is still lower. And more tempered as well. It feels a lot more reasonable. There's less active haters and more people who are just really passionate about the game and expressing stuff that they don't like about it, or just stuff that's affecting their enjoyment of it, and less I hate this, I'm screw LSS, all the kind of stuff.
Well, it is tough to kind of criticize the company that like seems to put so much of their heart and soul into it. I think, like I'm not much of a complainer. I will complain when I think it's like, well, I want it to be better. It's not like, it's like this sucks and that's it. No, I want it to be not the experience that I'm having. So I think that's what probably most of the community, I would think, is doing. So, complaining sucks, I think, in general, but like if it's constructive, I think it's probably okay. And I think LSS listens. I think it's pretty clear they do. So it was pretty cool. Yeah. Now,
I mean, for sure, I'll complain all day about Illusionist, and I have before. I'll complain that I feel like I didn't get a wizard in Rosetta or whatever, but yeah, I don't know about like too much, or even it does feel like exactly what you're saying. It's for now at least it seems like in general it's more on the constructive side of criticism rather than hating.
Yeah, we're not upset. We're just disappointed, or or whatever.
And it comes from a place of passion. Right?
Exactly.
It just comes from straight up. We love this game. So, yeah.
And we know how good it can be. So. But thanks for the questions, everybody, and thank you, Pankaj, for coming on the show. You've been amazing, and I'm really glad to have gotten you on. I'd like you to plug anything you'd like to plug, and thank you, my friend.
So my Twitter handle is @ThinkSmoke. You can follow me on there. I don't post too much. every now and then I'll like post a meme or something, which I haven't done in a while. I should get back to doing that. Aside from that, yep, Arsenal Pass. We have a weekly podcast, so come give us a listen there as well. And other than that, typically big tournaments, big events, I would be there casting. So please do come up and say hi. I always appreciate that. And thank you for having me on the podcast. This was really, really fun to do.
Awesome. No,
really appreciate it.
Anytime. And please, everybody, do check all that out. Although I'm sure everybody knows who Pankaj is. So, keep checking them out. How about that? You can continue to find me on this podcast, Fresh and Buds, which is on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe there. It's also on all audio platforms. On Spotify, you can rate podcasts. So do that for this one and Arsenal Pass. How about that? Check out the Buds Discord. Check out, I'm on Twitter, Blue Sky, mostly Blue Sky these days. There is a giveaway still going on there. And then also my other podcast I do with my cousin, Fresh Juice. We talk about indie video games. You can check that out as well. And finally, Pankaj, I like to send off every show talking about food because I love food. What's some food you want to talk about as we say goodbye?
Wow, that's very apt because just recently I was harping to someone about how much I love mala. Do you know mala? Have you heard of it?
It sounds familiar.
It's this Chinese spice. It's made of Sichuan peppercorns. It's a sort of spice where it numbs your tongue a little bit. It's like a numbing, tingling sensation on your tongue. So actually, just last night, I went to go have mala at this place nearby that I really, really like. They serve it in the soup. There's dry mala and there's like soup mala. This place only does the soup one. But yeah, it's perfect for the cold weather right now too. And I just love spicy food and mala in particular.
Oh, that sounds good. It's cold here tonight, and I should be getting some spicy food after this. Thank you so much, Pankaj. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time for Charmer, but I'm sure we'll get to him eventually. Everybody, please stay fresh.